In this video, I'm going to annotate or show you my annotations for Chapter 2 of George Orwell's novella Animal Farm. Quick recap of what we looked at in Chapter 1. Okay, so we're introduced to the treatment of the animals by Mr. Jones, and look, that's going to be elaborated on in Chapter 2. We had Old Major giving his speech and introducing this idea of the rebellion and the revolution of the animals against their oppressors, man. So man is the enemy. So Chapter 2. 3 nights later, Old Major died peacefully in his sleep. Okay, so this matches what actually happened in history, where Karl Marx died before the Russian Revolution, so died before he had a chance to see communism actually in action. We're introduced to 3 central characters, 3 pigs, Napoleon, Snowball and Squealer. So here Orwell writes Napoleon, and this is our narrator who's communicating this information, and a lot of the information in Animal Farm comes from our narrator. This is written in the third person. Napoleon was a large, rather fierce-looking Berkshire boar, not much of a talker, but with a reputation for getting his own way. So we're starting to get this understanding of Napoleon from the start. Snowball was a more vivacious pig than Napoleon, quicker in speech and more inventive, but was not considered to have the same depth of character. Okay, and then we have Squealer, who was a brilliant talker. The others, somehow very persuasive. The others said of Squealer that he could turn black into white. Look, I think this is a really important quote, this one, because this is one of the main ways that the pigs are able to maintain and develop their power in Animal Farm is through this use of propaganda. Now, Squealer is said to represent Molotov, who was the head of communist propaganda, and you can see I've written that down there. We have Snowball, who represents Leon Trotsky, and we have Napoleon, who represents Joseph Stalin, who becomes the leader of the Soviet Union. Here I've highlighted animalism, so animalism represents communism. Now, I think I briefly touched on this the other day, talking about Molly representing the bourgeoisie and her wanting sugar and to wear ribbons. Okay, now what I also talked about was Moses the Raven representing the Russian Orthodox Church. Okay, and so here he's talking about a mysterious country called Sugar Candy Mountain, to which all animals went when they died. It was situated somewhere up in the sky, a little distance beyond the clouds. Moses said, in Sugar Candy Mountain it was Sunday 7 days a week, clover was in season all the year round, and lump sugar and linseed cake grew on the hedges. So Karl Marx once famously wrote that religion is the opiate of the masses. And this is what Orwell is communicating here, is this idea that in the previous life, through the speech of Old Major, Orwell's communicating this idea of the misery of life as a worker. Well, this idea of heaven, that there was actually a better life if they did what they were supposed to do in this life on earth, that there's this idea of a better life that they would then have after they died. So that's why he said that religion was the opiate of the masses being the workers. Now, when I read this, and I think this is the beauty of a fable, when I read this, it seems ridiculous. And I think that's where Orwell's really effectively, and I could probably highlight this bit if I went straight back to the start. I think form and structure is our red one. I could potentially highlight this in that reddy orange colour as well, because he's able, through using I've forgotten the word, Aphromorphism. I'll look that one up. It's where you actually use animals, and this is the thing with fables, is you think about the hare and the tortoise. Writers were actually able to put their message through using animals. This idea in the hare and the tortoise, that you're better to work consistently than have talent where you don't actually have to work hard. Now, here we have Orwell using Sugar Candy Mountain and this idea of heaven. Now, he's not saying that heaven is ridiculous, but his creation of this idea, and this is the idea that fuels the idea that often people have around the idea of heaven. Orwell, through this, is ridiculing this idea because it just comes across as ridiculous. This idea that it was Sunday 7 days a week, clover was in season all year round, and lump of sugar and linseed cake. If this was humans rather than animals that he was writing about, I don't think it would be as effective. So he's very cleverly used the form of a fable to communicate his ideas about religion. Okay, now we also have here their most faithful disciples. Now, this is the pigs, because the pigs think Sugar Candy Mountain and Moses are ridiculous. Their most faithful disciples are the two cart horses, Boxer and Clover. These two had great difficulty in thinking anything out for themselves, and this is really important in the story. Okay, now we come down, and I'd recommend highlighting this. The fields were full of weeds, the buildings wanted roofing, the hedges were neglected, and the animals were underfed. This is really important as reasons for the revolution. Okay, now Orwell is saying that Russia as a country was not being well run by its leaders and by Tsar Nicholas II. They were just used to thrashing and maltreating just as they chose. So this is the men, this is the owners, this is the nobles, this is the Tsar. But of course we suddenly have this impromptu revolution. And this is actually mirrors what actually happened. The February Revolution in 1917 wasn't planned. It was just a kind of spontaneous uprising. I would then recommend you going to page 16. This is where we have Manor Farm changing its name to Animal Farm. Again, if we go to our cyclical structure, this name the pigs will change it back right at the end, back to Manor Farm. And then we go to the 7 Commandments. And look, the 7 Commandments are really important because the pigs will break every single one of these commandments. Whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy. Well, the pigs start walking. Whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend. Well, they pretty much mistreat every single animal on the farm, with maybe the exception of the dogs. No animal shall wear clothes. Well, the pigs do start wearing clothes. No animal shall sleep in a bed. Well, they rewrite that one to say with sheets. No animal shall drink alcohol. They change that one to excess. No animal shall kill any other animal. Well, they have the purges, which again is matching Russian history. All animals are equal. We have the wonderful paradox, but some animals are more equal than others. So the pigs are going to break all of these commandments. Now, Orwell has actually said that this idea of the milk and apples, and this is going to come up in the next chapter, that the milk and apples, he believes, he wrote the novella, he says is the most important part. This is when the other animals should have actually stopped it. And what happens here is, never mind the milk, comrades, cried Napoleon, placing himself in front of the buckets. That will be attended to. The harvest is more important. Comrade Snowball will lead the way. I shall follow in a few minutes. Forward, comrades. The hay is waiting. So the animals trooped down to the hayfield to begin the harvest, and when they came back in the evening, it was noticed that the milk had disappeared. So this milk disappearing is this first act, which was foreshadowed earlier by Orwell, this first act of corruption by the pigs. Okay, so look, if I've missed anything, by all means, add your own annotations. add your own questions, connections that you make. What I want you to do now is you need to, again, do the word, phrase, sentence activity. So find a word that captured your attention or struck you as powerful. Write down a phrase that moved, engaged, or provoked you. And a sentence that was meaningful to you that you felt captured the core idea of the text. So go back through the chapter and find those. Thank you so much for watching.